The Oregon forest was quiet that morning, still soaked from the night's rain, cloaked in low mist and blanketed in the earthy scent of pine and ash. Jake Carter, 38, a widowed search and rescue volunteer and father of a 10-year-old boy named Noah, had been tracking reports of debris after a Boeing 737 had gone down somewhere in the Cascades. He wasn't supposed to be out here alone, but Jake never waited for permission when someone might still be alive. The wreckage was worse than he imagined. Charred trees, twisted steel, luggage blown open like confetti. The tail of the plane was buried into a hill, black smoke still curling up like a dying signal flare. Emergency crews hadn't arrived yet. Jake had hiked in before roads were cleared. As he picked his way through what used to be seats and metal frames, his eyes caught something unexpected. A woman. She lay against the base of a scorched tree, unconscious, blood crusted in her hairline, a torn beige coat wrapped around her like armor. Mid-30s maybe, skin pale, knuckles scraped, and barefoot. But what stopped him wasn't just her condition, it was that her face wasn't familiar. He had seen the passenger manifest earlier that morning. She wasn't on it. Jake knelt, checking her pulse. It was weak but steady. She was alive. "You're okay," he whispered more to himself, lifting her gently. She stirred with a faint gasp, but didn't wake. He wrapped her in his spare rescue blanket and started the hike back down, each step a fight against the terrain, his breath clouding in the cold air. By the time Jake got her back to his cabin, night had started to fall. The cabin sat at the edge of a clearing, modest and lived in. A place filled with quiet echoes of a life he once shared with his late wife. Inside, the fire was already going. Noah had kept it alive, like Jake taught him. The boy looked up from his sketchpad as his dad carried the woman in. "Who's that?" Noah asked, eyes wide. Jake didn't answer. He was still wondering the same thing. He laid her on the couch, checked her breathing, and gently wiped dried blood from her temple. She didn't wake, but her presence filled the room, like the forest had handed them a secret. She was a stranger with no name. But something in Jake's gut told him, this woman wasn't just a survivor. She was something more, something fated. The sky outside the cabin was still bruised with dawn's earliest light when she stirred. Jake was already awake, sitting near the fireplace, sipping his coffee like he did every morning before checking the trail radio. But this morning was different. He didn't turn on the news, didn't check the weather. His eyes had been on the woman since 5 a.m., watching for any sign of movement. Then, finally, her fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered open with a wince, her breathing sharp, as if her body remembered the trauma before her mind could. Jake moved slowly, crouching beside her. "You're safe," he said gently. "You're in my home. You were in the crash." Her gaze was wild at first, disoriented. Her pupils darted around the log walls, the quilted throw, the fire crackling nearby. And then her hand flew up to her forehead. A soft cry escaped her lips. Jake eased a hand out, steady but non-threatening. "You're okay. Just a cut. I cleaned it. You've been out for nearly a day." She tried to sit up but winced at the motion. "The plane," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, dry. "Where is everyone?" Jake paused. "They haven't pulled everyone out yet. Rescue teams are combing the wreckage now. But you weren't listed. Your name's not on the manifest." The woman blinked. Her throat worked silently, as if swallowing 1,000 things she wasn't ready to say. "I shouldn't have been on it," she finally replied, barely audible. "I boarded at the last second. No ID, no luggage, just I needed to disappear." That answer did something strange to Jake's chest, something between empathy and worry. He wanted to ask why, but something about the way her fingers gripped the edge of the blanket made him stay quiet. "I'm Jake," he offered instead. "And that kid you might hear running around outside? That's Noah, my son. He knows how to keep secrets." A faint smile tugged at her lips, tired, wary, but real. "Call me Grace," she said. It's not my real name, but it's the one I want to use for now." "Grace," Jake repeated. "Fitting." That day passed like a dream caught between fear and peace. Grace couldn't move around much, but she helped Noah fold laundry from the couch and listened to him chatter about constellations, Star Wars, and his mom's favorite soup recipe. She didn't say much, but she listened in a way that made him feel important. Seen. Jake caught her staring out the window more than once, watching the trees sway, watching her own reflection, watching something far away only she could see. When night came, she insisted on washing a few dishes, leaning carefully against the counter. Jake didn't stop her. He understood the quiet dignity of trying to be useful when you felt lost. "You don't have to do anything," he finally said. Grace turned to him, soap still on her hands, her voice steady now. "I have to feel real again." Jake nodded. He got that more than she knew. Before bed, she asked him, "Why didn't you just leave me there?" Jake shrugged lightly. "Because someone didn't leave me behind when my life crashed." He didn't explain what he meant. He didn't need to, and Grace didn't press. But the way she looked at him, that deep, soul-level kind of glance, it said she understood. They were both survivors, but maybe, just maybe, they were meant to save each other. 3 days had passed since the crash, and the snow on the mountain had started to melt under an unexpected warm front. But the mystery surrounding Grace only thickened. Jake hadn't told the rangers she was with him. He told himself it was to protect her privacy. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He didn't want to let her go, not until he understood who she really was, not until she was ready. She moved better now, though her ribs were still tender and her ankle swollen. But there was something sharp behind her eyes, like she was always listening, always calculating. She wasn't afraid exactly, just prepared for anything. One morning, Jake stepped out to the shed to fetch firewood, only to find Grace standing in the snow, barefoot, staring at the tree line. "You shouldn't be out here," he said gently, slipping off his coat and wrapping it around her shoulders. Grace flinched, not from him, but from something inside her. "I used to go hiking alone when I needed to breathe," she murmured. "The trees don't ask questions." Jake stood beside her, the silence thick but safe. "You didn't just sneak onto that plane," he finally said. "You were running from something." She turned to him, face unreadable. "What makes you think that? You don't sleep. You flinch at the sound of helicopters. You check the window every hour, and you lie like someone who's done it before." Grace's eyes softened, not with guilt, but sorrow. "You're not wrong," she admitted, "but knowing the truth won't make you safer." "I'm not asking for the truth," Jake replied. "I'm asking if you're in danger." She didn't answer, and that silence told him everything. Later that evening, Jake called an old friend in law enforcement, asking discreetly about unidentified survivors from the crash. "Nothing official," the friend said, "but rumors. One body can't be accounted for, and a few suitcases were found with cash and forged IDs." Jake stared out the window after the call. Grace was on the porch with Noah, helping him build a birdhouse. She was laughing softly as Noah showed her how to hammer a nail. For someone hiding from the world, she looked like she belonged in it more than anyone he knew. But the question kept tightening in Jake's chest. What kind of woman walks away from a fiery crash, hides her name, and has eyes full of war? That night, as they cleaned up dinner, Grace asked, "Do you regret saving me?" Jake looked up, surprised. Not even for a second. She studied his face, then nodded, as if filing that answer somewhere deep inside, and that's when she said something that chilled him. "I think someone's looking for me," she whispered. Jake set down the dish. "Someone dangerous?" Grace's lips trembled. The kind that doesn't believe in survivors. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window with the rifle he hadn't touched in years across his lap, the cabin dark except for the glowing embers in the fireplace. The weight of Grace's words had settled over him like heavy snowfall. Someone's looking for me. The kind that doesn't believe in survivors. He kept replaying them in his head. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and every creak of the cabin's wooden frame felt louder, more threatening. Inside, Grace slept fitfully on the couch. She hadn't wanted to take the bedroom, but Jake insisted. Tonight, though, she'd moved back to the couch, closer to the exit. Old instincts, she said. Easier to run if things go bad. Jake understood. He had some of those instincts too. Ever since his wife died in a car accident 2 years ago, he'd raised Noah alone. He had learned how to live with a broken heart, how to move forward carrying the weight of grief. But Grace carried something else, something alive. Her past wasn't just a memory. It had teeth, and it was hunting. By morning, the snowfall returned, soft but steady. Grace was already up, drinking tea in the kitchen. She looked calmer than she had in days. "Thank you for last night," she said without looking at him. "You didn't see me do anything," Jake replied, "but I heard you awake. That was enough." They didn't talk about it more, but there was a shift, something silent and mutual, a pact not made with words but with presence. Later, while Noah napped, Grace pulled out a small object from her coat pocket, a USB drive, sleek, metallic, and worn. Jake raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "The reason I'm alive," she said, "and the reason they'll kill me if they find me." She handed it to him. "There's enough on here to destroy a billion-dollar company, a company built on lies, cover-ups, and people who vanish when they ask the wrong questions." Jake turned the drive over in his hand, not sure if he should feel honored or cursed. "Why give it to me?" Grace's eyes didn't waver. "Because you're the only person who didn't ask me to be anything but human." In the distance, a faint sound cut through the hush of snowfall. A drone. Jake snapped his head toward the window. Grace was already moving, grabbing her bag, pulling her hood up, her body coiled tight with panic. Jake stepped in her way. "Running won't fix it. You're not alone anymore." Her voice cracked. "I can't bring danger to Noah. I can't. He's my reason to fight harder, not to run." They looked at each other, the silence ringing louder than sirens. Then, together, they stepped out onto the porch. The drone hovered briefly above the tree line, then zipped away. Grace breathed out slowly, her hands trembling. Jake didn't let go of her arm. And somewhere in that tension, a thread of something unspoken pulled taut between them. Not quite love, but no longer just survival. The drone never came back. But Jake knew that didn't mean they were safe. Grace had trusted him with something dangerous, something that could topple men in suits who never blinked, who never missed. The USB drive stayed locked in a drawer under Jake's workbench, nestled between an old wedding ring and a faded photo of Noah's first steps. And each night, Grace stayed a little longer at the dinner table, listening to Noah's stories, laughing at his wild imagination. She helped with dishes, fed the birds at sunrise, and read bedtime stories like she'd done it all her life. But that peace couldn't last. On a quiet afternoon, Jake drove into town for supplies. Grace stayed behind to watch Noah, her hand never far from the backpack that carried everything she owned. But when she stepped outside to gather firewood, she heard something off. Not footsteps, too light. Not wind, too still. Then she saw it. A boot print, fresh. Not Jake's, not hers. It hadn't snowed in hours. She rushed inside and locked the door. She didn't scream, didn't panic. She packed food, grabbed Noah's coat, and slipped the USB back into her boot. She was already reaching for the back exit when headlights cut across the snow. Jake's truck. She flung open the door and ran to him. "Someone's been here." Jake's jaw tightened. "Get inside." He checked the perimeter, rifle in hand, eyes sharp. No one. But the print was there. A single reminder. They were being watched. Back inside, Grace sat by the fire with Noah on her lap. She hummed a lullaby Jake had never heard before. Her voice cracked halfway through and Noah looked up. "Are you crying?" She smiled through it. "Just remembering someone I lost." Jake stood nearby, watching her, understanding more with every quiet moment she shared. That night, Grace told him the truth. Her real name was Mara Lang. She'd been a whistleblower at Lycoris Global, an aerospace conglomerate tied to defense contracts and backroom deals. She'd uncovered falsified safety reports, one of which was connected to the plane that crashed. "They tried to silence me," she said. "I was never supposed to be on that flight. I snuck on with a fake ID. I had to deliver the data to someone face to face, but I never made it, until you pulled me out of the wreckage." Jake listened without judgment, only quiet resolve. "What happens now?" she asked. Jake walked to the drawer, took out the USB, and placed it in her hand. "We finish what you started." She stared at him. "You and Noah could get hurt." Jake looked toward the hallway where his son slept peacefully. "He already lost one parent. I'm not letting fear take me from him too." Mara swallowed hard, the weight of his words anchoring her. For the first time, she wasn't running alone. Snow blanketed the roads like silence before a storm. Jake drove with steady hands, Mara in the passenger seat, Noah asleep in the back, cradling a stuffed bear and murmuring in dreams. The USB drive was hidden in Mara's boot, warm against her ankle like a ticking fuse. They were heading to the only person Mara still trusted. Eleanor Rivers, a retired investigative journalist turned recluse who once exposed a pharmaceutical empire's darkest secret. Eleanor owed Mara's father a favor, and she had the reach to make sure the truth didn't die in the cold. The plan was simple: deliver the files, disappear, and let the truth speak louder than bullets. But fate had other plans. Just before dawn, their truck skidded to a stop at a police checkpoint. Two unmarked SUVs, men in black jackets with eyes too still, too calm. Not local cops, not here to protect. Jake's fingers curled around the steering wheel. One of the men stepped forward, knocking on the glass with gloved knuckles. "Sir, step out of the vehicle." Jake opened the door slowly. "Is there a woman in the vehicle?" the man asked. Jake didn't answer. His eyes met Mara's in the mirror. Then Noah stirred in the back, rubbing his eyes. "Dad?" The man's gaze shifted. "You're traveling with a child." Jake smiled slightly. "You want to hurt a mother in front of her kid?" The man blinked. Mara opened the door on the other side. "Let me talk to your boss." There was a pause, then a radio crackled. Minutes later, a new car pulled up. A tall woman in a long coat stepped out. Not a soldier, not a killer. Eleanor Rivers. Mara's breath caught. She came. Eleanor walked up like she owned the dawn. "Step away from the vehicle," she barked. The agents hesitated. "You touch them again, and every news outlet from CNN to the BBC will have your home addresses by breakfast." The agents backed off. Jake exhaled. Mara stepped forward and hugged Eleanor so hard it knocked the wind out of her. "I didn't think you'd come." "You're your father's daughter," Eleanor said, "and I owe him my life." They handed over the USB. Eleanor tucked it into her coat and gave Mara the kind of look that said, "It's done." And just like that, the wolves vanished. 3 months later, Mara's story broke on every major channel. The crash was exposed, Lycoris Global toppled, arrests made. Her name was cleared. She was hailed a hero. But Mara didn't want cameras or crowds. She stayed in the woods with Jake and Noah. They built a new home beside the cabin. She planted sunflowers. Noah insisted on naming the chickens after Avengers. Jake carved her name into a new rocking chair beside his. And on one quiet spring morning, while Mara read to Noah beneath the old birch tree, Jake stepped outside with a coffee and whispered, "You know, when I pulled you from that wreck, I thought I was saving you." Mara smiled, closing the book. "Turns out we were saving each other." Some miracles don't come in shining lights or booming voices. Sometimes they crash into your world, broken, lost, and carrying the pieces you didn't know were missing.